What's up, y'all? Welcome back. Pitchside with Parker for another video. Today, we are doing a recap of week 1 in the NWSL. And boy, there is a lot to talk about. So I've got somebody here on hand with me. Today, we're going to be discussing the fallout from the racist incident involving Sarah Gorden of Chicago Red Stars and the scuffles between Morgan Weaver and Kristen Edmonds, which, as we are recording this, the NWSL has just put out their ruling on. So some very fresh and big and important topics to talk about. And then after that, we are also going to hand out some awards for week 1, some of our favorites, things that we saw through the first round of NWSL games, and give our predictions for the games coming up this week. But without further ado, let me introduce my guest. He's the host of the Soccer Cast Chicago. He covers Red Stars and Chicago Fire for Hot Time Old Town. And he's a great broadcaster on top of that as well, man. Alex Campbell, welcome to the channel. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, Parker, what's up? Thanks for having me. Excited to talk the craziness that has been both the last few days and the last 2 hours of NWSL stuff that we've seen going on.
No doubt, man. It has been a wild day. I'm sure, especially for you as someone who covers Chicago Red Stars and you're all over the breaking news with them. I mean, a lot of it has been around Red Stars, especially Sarah Gorden.
Yeah, we'll get into that. It's been, it's been frustrating. It's been disappointing. It's been confusing. It's, the game itself was not very good between Chicago and Houston. It was the opener of the tournament, and it looked like two teams that hadn't played soccer in 6 months. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons that the game is not going to be what's remembered, but yeah, if you want to start there, I mean, it's we've seen this week's been complicated for the Red Stars, especially with the reports that after the game, Sarah Gorden, particularly Sarah Gorden's boyfriend, who had traveled to Houston to support her, was approached by security and was threatened with arrest if he did not leave the premises, because supposedly players and any guests were not allowed to interact. And Sarah Gorden went on Twitter and laid out what had transpired and pointed out that the Houston Dash players, not too far away from her, all of whom are white, were gathering in close contact with their families. And so there was a pretty obvious double standard being set there. And the response has been slow, I think, to say the least. The NWSL says they're investigating. The Houston Dash put out a really bad statement that was like, oh, this was just about COVID protocols. And then 2 days later, we're like, wait, our bad. We realize this is serious, and apparently we have done the wrong thing here. We've said the wrong things here, so we're gonna try to do right by everyone in the future, and that's kind of been it. We get the punishments tonight, and we'll get into those. But yeah, it's just been, we've seen over the last year, teams and clubs and players say a lot of things in the wake of George Floyd's murder last year and the protests that then followed. And this event, at least for the league, feels like the first real test of, does the league, do clubs, do players mean the things they said a year ago? And we're getting a lot of answers quickly.
Yeah, really from across the spectrum, because, we can also be somewhat positive in this. I mean, I think a lot of the Red Stars players have really come immediately and strongly to Sarah Gorden's support as well. So it's like you said, these players and these clubs are really getting tested to what they said last summer and how much it really meant. And I think the league as a whole as well, because, it's not just on the individuals, and especially when you have these sanctions that are coming out, or rulings in any case on, when we look at the Morgan Weaver and Kristen Edmonds incident and how that was all handled. And I mean, overall, I've just been a little sad at this opening weekend. Obviously, these are issues that you never want to face, but at the same time, it's like, I was just excited to watch some games, man. Like,
right. And
could we not go a week without just creating these? I mean, obviously, Sarah Gorden's situation was completely that wasn't, their fault or anything. But if you look at Portland Thorns and the way that they've handled the incident of the kind of fight that took place in that game, and tweeting about it afterwards and saying that Morgan Weaver was innocent from their official Twitter page, a very, very loaded statement. Like, these things are avoidable. They didn't have to happen.
They are. And that was actually a good soccer game.
Yes.
Unlike Chicago and Houston, which was pretty drab. that Portland against KC match was fun. And I'm not going to get into details here, but the other thing that happened that I thought was interesting behind the Portland thing, not only that initial tweet, which Portland as an organization has been always fairly apologetic on both the men's and the women's side. That's just kind of the way owner Merritt Paulson rolls. And in a lot of ways, I kind of respect that about him. But this is, I think, an instance where maybe the brashness went a little far. The Thorns social media manager then went out into the comments and started arguing with people who had an issue with the way they tweeted that and the way they were going about it. And, that to me is just, if you're going to tweet something from the official team account and then your response to the backlash is to go to your personal and start, arguing with people and, throwing accusations around, it was really just, I don't think the Thorns handled it well at all. And, eventually Morgan Weaver's red card is rescinded and we can debate the merits of that.
What was your thoughts on that? I mean, from a purely game standpoint, looking at what happened between those two players, what do you think should have happened in the first
I understand why the ref did what the ref did. The ref saw two players in what, if the ref herself did not see the entire incident with her own eyes. You see two players getting into an apparent fist fight and there's a huge mess. They have almost incited a brawl. The safe thing to do if you're the ref there is to send both players off. It is the overly cautious, you could argue, thing to do. But if you're looking to diffuse that situation and prevent literally a brawl, the best thing you can do is the two players involved, send them both off, and then you clean up later. And that's kind of what this is. And honestly, I think if Portland had just done the normal thing, if Portland had not, poured gasoline on things, if they had simply said, we are appealing Morgan Weaver's red card, said nothing, and then Morgan Weaver's red card gets overturned, I don't think we make that big a deal of it. I think we would argue, how involved was she? Whatever. I think the reason this is such a big deal is because of the way Portland reacted. Now, on the other side, a 2-game suspension for hitting a player in the face. Yeah, that seems fair. I think that's okay. And I do want to double back to something real quick because I'm probably going to write a column for Hot Time in Old Town at some point. I just have a very busy week and I don't have time to get there. I do want to put one last note on the Sarah Gorden responses. You mentioned the response from teammates. We've seen this statement that's gone around. I think Casey Kruger was the first one I saw posted. Don't quote me on that. I don't know if she was first.
I'll put it up on the screen so that everybody can read it.
Yeah, that was the first one I saw, and then they continued to pour in. And the NWSL's Black Women's Player Collective, they put out a statement as well. And this wasn't anything complicated. This morning, I just noticed I had seen a lot, and so I decided to go through all of the players' social media accounts on Twitter and Instagram. I try to follow them all, and to double check, I went through the Red Stars follows and made sure I didn't miss any players. And the concerning thing that came out of today was every single player on the Red Stars team had posted this message signed the players of the Chicago Red Stars, except Captain Julie Ertz. And, Tierna Davidson and Alyssa Nair, who are also over in Europe right now playing for the USWNT. Equally busy, equally bad time zone, probably equally checked out on day-to-day what on earth is going on back home. They both posted both the team message and the Black Women's Player Coalition message. And, I think maybe now the Red Stars' silence is answered by the fact that they were afraid of a fine, which turns out they got anyway. But between, the Houston Dash managed 2 statements. The first one was bad, but they managed to say, hey, here's our version of events, or here's our response to what was clearly a disturbing incident. We've heard nothing from the team. And now you've got the team captain being the only player who is not at least, we could talk about how statements can be performative, and that's been a conversation a lot today in women's soccer circles, but it's the bare minimum in my view. To simply say, hey, this is a conversation we as a team had, and here's a statement we agreed on, and we're all going to put this out there, and then to have 99% participation. If it's one of those things, if a third string goalkeeper or a player who played 60 minutes all season last year is the one who's not involved, yeah, it's a bad look, but okay, is it that big a deal? Is it really going to shake the locker room? When it's the team captain, I think this is a watch this space scenario, and it's not for good reasons. The Red Stars have been renowned the last few years of being a really great team culture, and it really seemed like that's kind of what made them special, was the family atmosphere of that locker room and the way those players all bonded together, partially as a result of that. There hasn't been that much roster turnover. That core has been largely there for like 4+ years now. And so now this team really feels like it's at a crossroads. When all those players come back from international duty, it's going to be interesting.
What it all kind of comes back to for me, especially in regards to Sarah Gorden specifically, because, she ended up getting involved with the Portland Thorns as well on Twitter, that she said, you need to delete this tweet. And the main issue at hand across all of these incidents is that she has said, and multiple Black players have said, that they don't feel safe in the league. It's not a space that is welcoming to them. It's a space where they experience racism. Their families experience racism in the case of her boyfriend. And that was backed up in the statement that the Players Collective put out. And I think what you say about Ertz, that's where there's a failing here, because as long as there are people who are going to refuse to say stuff, and then they're supported by their team, and, oh, it's your right to not say anything, or, as long as they have to continue being in the locker room, that's why this space is bad, even if it's only one player, right? As you say, if that's really your captain.
People are entitled to their opinions, and we can disagree about people's opinions, but if someone's going to hold really firm on this and say, I think you're overreacting, or I don't think you're right on something like this, when someone is telling you their lived experience and it's not just a one-off, I don't think it goes very far to say that player can't be captaining a team. I mean, you look at the Red Stars have personalities like Alyssa Nair, who could step into that role and do a great job. Casey Kruger is another name that springs to mind as someone who would be an excellent captain. Vanessa DiBernardo has been on that team longer than anyone. She's been there since day one. This is a locker room full of really strong leaders. And so I do not doubt that they have the people capable of, if the locker room is really facing a crisis, I do not doubt that the Red Stars have the type of leadership in that locker room who can help solve it. I don't really think that's the concern, but yeah, it's like I said, it goes so much farther beyond one player not being on board, because again, the player in this case is, one of the best players in the world, is a lot of people's favorite player on this team, is just an unbelievably talented soccer player. And again, I should say that, we still haven't seen anything from Ertz. She hasn't posted anything. I imagine we're going to get an answer at some point. Just saying nothing forever, but it is just so odd that, to be last to such a thing, because it begs the question, was she in the conversation that led to a statement that said the Chicago Red Stars players? And if she wasn't, there's a whole nother round of questions that follows that. So it's obviously the most important thing here is that Sarah Gorden and her boyfriend were put in a position where they didn't feel safe inches from a field on which Sarah had just played. And that's inexcusable. And so, keep an eye on the NWSL's investigation and to see what, ultimately what the league says. Because again, this is not just a test for the Red Stars. This is a test for the NWSL.
Yeah, I appreciate your perspective as a Red Stars fan, because getting that kind of inside look at the locker room, it's very important that, these are not just like Twitter topics. It's really going to affect all of these teams. It's going to affect them the rest of this Challenge Cup, the rest of the season. I mean, look, the bottom line with all of this is that it's been a bit of a mess, and we are probably not.
It has been a mess.
Not done with any of these all individual issues that have brought a much broader and more critical scope to the league after the first week of games. But we are going to shift back into a little bit more of what we saw on the field in week one. And I wanted to hand out some awards. We're calling this quick kicks, because look, as we said, the Houston and Chicago game maybe is a little disappointing, but we got it out of the way first. And then NWSL After Dark certainly delivered both days. We had the 2-1 result with Portland Thorns. We had NC Courage continuing to look very strong, 3-2 win over Washington Spirit. And then last, but most certainly not least, the thrilling 2-2 draw between Orlando and Louisville in Louisville's debut, and 2 goals after the 88th minute in that one to take the lead and then one from Louisville to equalize. So with all that being said, Alex, we've got some great candidates here. What was your favorite goal from round 1 of games?
So I'm going to pick up from right where you just left off. Brooke Hendricks, 93rd minute equalizer for Louisville. And, it's not like a particularly it's not like it's a bicycle kick or the goal itself is particularly impressive. But again, it's a stoppage time equalizer to get a draw in your team's first ever game in a new stadium. And really what I think it's about for me is that really put on full display the excitement for this Louisville team. We don't know how good they're going to be. They're an expansion team, featuring, of course, Yuki Nagasato and Savannah McCaskill from the Red Stars. So it's really tough to gauge, where they're going to be. They drafted Emily Fox, a fullback from North Carolina, who's got a few national team appearances, first overall. She figures to immediately be potentially one of the league's best defenders pretty quickly. So we really don't know what Louisville's going to be, but I am always just so energized to see fans receive a team with so much hype, especially a women's
Totally.
team. Now, we can debate if it was safe to have as many fans in the stadium as Louisville had in that building for this game. And so we're going to set that to the side for now. But the idea that this Louisville team, once full crowds are allowed, could really be playing in front of a raucous crowd. That's a city that at the USL level on the men's side has proven that they can draw, 15, 20,000 a game and can do so consistently and provide a really great atmosphere and kind of a really community-driven club. That's why when both were in the USL, that's why Louisville City and FC Cincinnati were such a great rivalry, is because they had really similar energies just in terms of kind of coming from the grassroots in a decent-sized city and retaining that identity as they got bigger. So yeah, I think really I got to go with Brooke Hendricks, not only because the goal was a stoppage time equalizer, but because it just really signified, how exciting it is to have Louisville in the league, and also those kits are awesome, and so points for that.
I might disagree with you on the kits, but I'm just gonna let that be for the moment. I think I might be the only person in the world who doesn't like those kits. But for the best goal of my favorite goal, I should say, of round one, I gotta give it to Mara Mathias of NC Courage for her chip shot goal against Washington. This goal was just ridiculous, and I've heard Ian Wright say this before, that his favorite type of goal was a chip goal because you can start celebrating before the ball even goes in. Right. And that's basically what she did. She was like 2 arms up in the air, so excited when she scored it. It was incredible. I thought she had let her touch get away from her a little bit, actually. And but the goalkeeper was caught in no man's land. And the finish was just exquisite and really big for her as well. She's been coming off an ACL injury. So just like in her own personal recovery and getting back in with NC Courage, I thought that was a big moment for her as well. And a big goal in the game too. So it definitely wasn't the only good goal from that game. Shout out to Trinity Rodman as well on the board, but we might get to her in a moment. Anyway, that's my best goal. So we'll move on to biggest surprise from round one.
So I'm gonna be really Chicago centric here because that's the game I watched most closely.
Hey man, no problem.
Plenty of questions about how the Red Stars midfield is gonna work this year. Rory Dames has played a 4-2-3-1 for forever. It's kind of all they've ever played. And recently that has featured Morgan Gautrat and Danny Colaprico at the base of midfield, Vanessa DiBernardo at the 10. We saw them start in more of a flat 3 in this game. Out of possession, it was largely a 4-2-3-1. But we saw, rather than DiBernardo most often we saw Morgan Gautrat kind of pushing up in the counter press as that second striker. It's not unlike what we've seen the U.S. men's national team do in recent years under Greg Berhalter. They've kind of dropped away from this a bit, but the idea of that the most advanced of the midfield 3 out of possession, at least right after you lose possession, will press up to form a front 2. And we saw Morgan Gautrat doing a lot of that. She's, again, probably best described as a number 8. Colaprico usually is the more defensive of the pivot. But to see Gautrat both that high up the field, in and out of possession, we also saw that, so she would press high without the ball, and if the Red Stars won it back, she would kind of almost turn into the target forward, and then allow Katie Johnson to make runs off of her. The tactics weren't really seamless, but it was a wrinkle to see Gautrat that far up the field, particularly kind of in that pressing role, I thought was really interesting. And, I'm just looking for any breadcrumbs I can on what this midfield is going to look like with Sarah Waldmo coming into the mix and supposedly Julie Ertz maybe getting midfield minutes this year. That's a lot of people for not a lot of spots. And again, with a team that has been not the most tactically flexible historically, anything that's like, that's different is going to really stand out. And so that was probably the biggest wrinkle in this first Red Stars game was Morgan Gautraux's utilization as a presser.
Awesome. Love it. So I'm going to go with another player who has showed some positional flexibility, and that is Megan Klingenberg, popping up as a central midfielder for Portland Thorns and absolutely bossing it against Kansas City. Obviously, we know her as a fullback. The delivery is nothing new. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a particular surprise given her skill set and just her talent level in general that she did well at the center mid spot, but I was surprised by it. I certainly wasn't expecting to see that. And in Portland Thorns formation, where they have that diamond in midfield, or kind of 3 and then 1, if you will.
The Crystal Dunn position now, I think we just have to call it. She wasn't there to play it, but that's what this is going to be.
Totally. So it was a surprise though to see her pop up there, and she had an awesome game. So I want to give some credit to her, and shout out to Mark Parsons making the system work without their big stars. Although, as you said, I think she'll fit in pretty well there.
It's going to be that team. So I've written this multiple times. I think Portland, paces the league fairly comfortably this season. I know everyone's going to lose people for the Olympics, but you just look at the attacking depth that team has and the number of combinations they can throw. Assuming Crystal Dunn plays as the 10, which is what we are expecting in Portland, the combination of Morgan Weaver, Christine Sinclair, Simone Charlie, Sophia Smith, who they can throw in front of her, is just unreal. And you've got Lindsay Horan in midfield and Becky Sauerbrunn anchoring the defense. That roster's unreal. It's almost crazy that it was, other leagues you wouldn't be, in an MLS style system, you probably wouldn't be able to build that roster. But they have figured out a way. I think Portland's going to be a scary team this season. And then you add that, once we get later in the year, you could be looking at them having home field advantage in the playoffs in front of 25,000 fans. So good luck with that, everybody else.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult for the rest of the league. I couldn't agree more. So with that said, our final award we're going to give out, biggest winner of week 1. Alex, who do you got?
So I wanted to steal your answer, but I'm not going to. I'm going to go back to Louisville, because I just think in any sport, when an expansion team comes in, there's always the fear that you're going to step out in that first game and you're just going to get smushed. And, maybe the tactics aren't ready yet. We haven't had time. No one really knows each other. Maybe the team you're playing is very good. It's kind of like the same thing in European soccer leagues, when seemingly every season, one of the newly promoted teams has to play the defending champion. And it's like, well, this could go really badly. And I think Louisville, in a lot of ways, showed they're for real. They came out there. They looked confident. I think they showed they're going to be an exciting team to watch this season. They get the result. Again, I like the Kits. You might not like the Kits, but I just think in terms of, did they win the game? No, and that would have made it better. But in terms of an introduction to the league over the last week, I think Racing Louisville did amazing. And so I think they get my nod as they won the week. Simply, they've arrived in style, and they had a really exciting game for their fans at home. And I don't think they could have asked for much better than that.
And the vibes were immaculate. The light show was incredible. That was easily a win. I mean, I'm sure it felt like I think
that's a draw that feels like a win for
exactly.
Sure.
I think Hendricks said that she blacked out after the goal, which I don't blame her, because it was like pandemonium in that stadium. But my winner of the week is none other than the woman on the board here, Trinity Rodman.
It's the right answer.
Score with her second touch in her NWSL career. And for the first touch in her NWSL career to be a thigh control that Lionel Messi would have been proud of.
Yes.
I mean, what bigger statement can you make than that, really? I don't know how you can win more than that, other than, I guess, winning the actual game. But, she didn't start. That wasn't her fault they gave up 3 goals. So I got to say that she's the winner of week 1 for me. And, she made a splash. So I feel like you make that big of a statement on your first game, it could only mean good things for her and what she can do with Washington Spirit this year.
Yeah, youngest American goal scorer ever in an NWSL game. Number 2 overall pick in the draft, coming out of college early. She's going to be one to watch. She's been part of U.S. youth national teams, probably a few years off from being in the picture at the senior national team level. But I mean, if you look at the core of the forward group at the senior level, they're mostly north of 30 now. And so there's going to be a time here in the next 5 years or so where U.S. women's national team is going to be looking for forwards, is going to be looking for someone to step up and take the mantle from Lloyd and Rapinoe and Morgan and Heath and Press and Williams. When that group is gone, someone's going to have to step in. And so, Trinity Rodman is part of this next generation, and it's awesome to see her score in her debut. And this Challenge Cup is an opportunity for her as a rookie to really kind of put her name on the map.
No doubt about it. So let's move on to the predictions for next week very quickly. And I say next week, but by the time some of you are watching this video, you may well already be tuned in to Gotham and Orlando Pride, which is on Wednesday. So we'll start with that game. Gotham getting its first taste as a new brand, I suppose, taking on Orlando Pride team that drew against Racing Louisville. What do you think in this game?
I'm going Orlando. They've got a game under their belts. Gotham do not. Gotham are down Sarah Waldmo, their captain from last year. Malpugh didn't really play much last year, or really at all, so she doesn't exactly count here as a loss. But then Midge Purse is on national team duty as well, just in terms of, what made Sky Blue such an exciting team last season. Waldmo and Purse were such enormous parts of that, and I think it's going to take time for Gotham to develop their identity, not only off the pitch, which is new, but on it as well. So Orlando with a game under their belts, I think Orlando takes this one.
Yeah, I agree, simply for the fact that Orlando will be at home here. It's probably going to be very hot in Florida. And as you said, first game for Gotham. So I think that having that first game under their belt will help Orlando massively. And I think this is going to be a good game. I don't think I don't think Orlando are like really strongly the better team, but I am going to take them in this one for those reasons. The next game we have is Racing Lou taking on Washington Spirit in Washington. What's your take?
I'm going draw on this one. Again, as I've said a bunch of times, I thought Louisville had a really good start to life in the NWSL. I think that energy is gonna carry over on the road. Washington, we really don't know what this team's gonna be. Their forward lineup last year kind of got juggled around a bunch. Rose Lavelle is officially gone now, so they're trying to remake their identity. The question is, who does this team get built around? And, they don't really have a Rose Lavelle type who's going to be the gravitational force on this team. They got a lot of good players, but time's going to tell exactly, how they're going to look. So I think it's really too early to have any really big conclusions about either of these teams. So I'm going to go for a competitive draw.
I thought Washington looked really good in that first game against NC Courage, actually. I mean, NC Courage certainly got some goals. The defense was slightly worrisome, but I will take Washington at home. Racing Lou doesn't have the lights to lean back on, and I think Trinity Rodman scores another one, and I'm taking Washington Spirit in this game. All right, Alex, the big one for you. Thorns going to Chicago, Toyota Park to take on the Red Stars. What are you saying?
First of all, I appreciate you calling it Toyota Park and not SeatGeek Stadium, because that still feels like the better name. So if you asked me this a week ago, I would have said Thorns. But hey, no manager. Simone Charlie, who would be starting this game if the squad's at full strength, is suspended. Who knows where their heads are at after whatever the heck just happened in Portland this last game. All of that combined, although things aren't exactly pleasant in Red Stars land at the moment either. I've got this being a draw. I think the losses for Portland are enough, and we're going to probably see a really similar lineup, I think, from the Red Stars. Rory Dames said, unlike last year where he scripted basically all the games, he's not doing any of that this year, and is, kind of viewing it more as a, yes, it'd be nice to get people opportunities, but we're trying to win. Whereas last year he basically said we don't care about winning. So I expect both teams to put out the best 11s they can, but with a couple absences, Portland's going to have to dig deeper into their reserves than Chicago will. And so with a game together as an attacking unit, maybe some better ideas about how to create chances, I think the Red Stars will look better in this game and be able to match the Thorns.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with anything you said, really. So I'm just copying you on this one. You're the expert on Red Stars. I'm gonna take a draw on this one as well. I think this will be the chance for a team other than Portland to jump potentially into that top spot. I mean, The issue is that because Red Stars and Dash drew the first time and OL Reign was on standby for week one, no other team has a win that they could build on in terms of the standings here. But if Chicago was to win this game, for instance, that would really open up the West. Or if these teams were to draw, could open the door for OL Reign. I mean, you never know, really. There's a lot of good teams. So anyway, that is my long-winded way of saying I think Portland Thorns will drop points, and I'm going with a draw as well. So the final game is on Friday, and that's going to be Houston Dash versus OL Reign in Seattle. Alex, who got in this one?
So, Houston and Chicago, we talked about, didn't exactly light the world up in their first game. But like Chicago, I think Houston gets better in game 2, and this is their tournament until they lose it. They are the defending champs here. OL Reign, this is a team that I don't know if we're ever going to know exactly what they are this year, because their roster is not going to be the roster until summer. And then they're supposedly bringing in a couple high-profile players from Lyon. But then the Olympics hit, and those players will go to their national teams for the Olympics. So how many games are they actually going to play? Meanwhile, OL Reign is saving cap space for those players and allocation money to pay those players. Megan Rapinoe, it's always no big guess. How much does she actually play? I think she could make a bigger impact this year, but with her age and clearly a priority on the national team, we've seen her be someone who has been willing to not play a lot of club minutes to make sure she's fit for, international minutes. So I don't really know what to make of this team right now. Again, I think in 2022, OL Reign could be dangerous and could be a really cool roster and could be a team that's a threat in the NWSL. But right now, I'm just kind of shrugging. And so I'm going to say the Dash find some Challenge Cup mojo and grind out a win here. I don't think this game is pretty, but I think the Dash aren't going to settle for getting eliminated in just in the group stage. Well, not in the group stage. I should say that there's only one final, but I don't think the Dash are going to settle for potentially finding themselves bottom of their group. So yeah, I think the Dash find some mojo again and do just enough to win this game.
It pains me as somebody who picked up the Dash last year in their miraculous run to the Challenge Cup, but I got to be honest, I was far from impressed with that first game, and I don't really see how a lot could change here. So although there are certainly question marks about OL Reign, I did pick them second in my preview in the West because I think they have a very favorable schedule, and I think they get off to a start with 3 points against Houston Dash. So I'm going with OL Reign for the win in this one. But that is our last game. So that wraps up the predictions. Hope you enjoyed this little tour we took through the NWSL, the big headlines, some games from last week, and some predictions. Alex, big thank you for coming on, sharing your wisdom about Chicago and the Red Stars. It's been a pleasure, and I speak for all my viewers on YouTube in saying that they're very happy that they didn't just have to hear my voice for a video for a change. So thanks for coming on, man. And lastly, let the people know where they can get a hold of you, they can follow you.
Yeah, so I'm at Alex_S_Campbell on Twitter. I know it's a little complicated, but cursive having a common name. You can find me on Instagram, Alexander_S_Campbell there. As Parker mentioned, I write for Hot Time in Old Town, which is the SB Nation site for Chicago soccer. Mostly going to be on Red Stars this year. You'll find me doing some Fire stuff occasionally as well. And then check out SoccerCast Chicago, wherever you get your podcasts. I haven't posted an episode in a couple weeks, but got a couple things in the pipeline that I'm really excited about. So yeah, keep tabs on that. Would really appreciate if everyone who's interested in hearing about what's going on in the world of Chicago soccer, which is a lot these days. Maybe I'm going to have to find an episode ahead of schedule to break down everything that's just occurred in the last 48 hours. But yeah, that's where you can find all my stuff. And yeah, thanks, Parker. This was fun, and appreciate you having me on the channel. Congrats on all the success with it so far. Best of luck.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it. So the last thing left, if you didn't already hit that like button, be sure to do that. Subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and I will catch you in the next one. Alex might not, but we appreciate you either way, and we'll catch you next time.